Welcome everybody. This is the Tauranga and Western Bay Transport Committee meeting. We're trying to get this over. We're thinking it'll take about an hour and a half, just so that you give you an indication of timing. Just a reminder that this is live streamed. Remind members and staff that the public section of this meeting has been live streamed and recorded, and recordings will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting. Also to remind all present that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. Just a further reminder that this meeting is to consider governance matters, terms of reference and membership updates under which will come under item 8.1. But as an opening remark, what am I saying here? Welcome, invite Western Bay Council. Is he here? No, I don't think he is.
He's not here.
He's not here, so we can't invite the Western Bay Mayor along. He did say he would try to get here, so he might be late, but he just to let you know that he hasn't yet been selected by his council to be the delegate on this committee, but that's the inference that he will be. So he will be he should be for the next meeting. Right. So apologies. The apologies I've got is Councillor Paula Thompson, and we do have an alternate in Kat Millen, so she has full voting rights. Susan Collins of NZTA is an apology, and Gary Maloney is on the Zoom, coming to us via Zoom. Welcome, Gary, and we offer you full speaking rights. NZTA isn't a voting member of this committee, but does have speaking rights. So can I call for are there any other apologies? Oh, she's NZTA. So we've got a second person. Sorry, Nairi. I didn't realise you were NZTA. Nairi Atmore, is that? And whereabouts are you based, Nairi?
I'm based in Hamilton, so I'm the Regional Advisor System Design, working closely with Susan.
Okay, thank you and welcome. And you're welcome to make contributions as well. Thank you.
Excuse me, Andrew. I know Mayor James is intending to be here. I saw him earlier this morning. He was intending to be here.
Yes, he told me he thought he'd be here, and so I've already said that. So you're sitting in as the mayor at the moment. This, because I just explained, Western Bay hasn't selected a delegate for this meeting yet. So, but I'm happy for speaking rights. Okay. Would someone like to move that the apologies be accepted? Thank you, Councillor Crowther, and seconded by Councillor Kurek. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Public forum, there has been nothing received for that. Items not on the agenda, there are none noted. And the order of business, there's no change. Declarations of conflicts of interest, are there any? None that have been declared. Public excluded business to be transferred into the open, there is none. Minutes to be confirmed, they're on page 7 of our agendas. Would someone first of all like to move them as a true and correct record? Councillor Crowther, Councillor Kurak, all in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Is there any matters arising out of those? Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, just wanting to check whether the under the Tauranga West Public Transport Hub whether that will be reported back in the item 8.2, and same for, I think there's another one that was in there, which I've now haven't got my head around, but certainly, yeah, for that one, is that going to be incorporated into the discussion today? Because there's supposed to be a report back.
Yes, and I had also noted there's an update needed for that, and I didn't see it in the agenda. So happy, Sean?
Sorry, just through the chair. That hasn't become clearer, unfortunately, over the last month. So, yeah, apologies there, but we will report back when it is clearer, and we can, provide you and something to comment on a little bit more fully. The work program workshop a little bit later is hopefully going to be able to, you can use that to discuss some of that more broad conversation around that decision-making process.
And through the chair, the other one, I've just spotted what it was. It was the benefit cost ratios for the bus lanes along Wanganui Road to be provided to the committee members.
Who's that? You, Michael?
Sorry, once again through the chair, I will need to chase that one up. I think that was sitting with Connecting Mount Wanganui.
All right. So the only other matter that comes out of that was 9.4, which was the Transport Committee structure and function. And we just need to be really clear how this committee was set up. I'll just give the history. Was set up by an agreement between Commissioner Tolley and myself, actually, and what was its big aim was to actually ensure that staff were collaborating closely together, and we wanted to facilitate that to make it happen, and I think we have. So there was concern in the 2024 that the meetings were starting to get a bit long. We have to remember that we do have a public transport committee that, which for operational matters. This is designed to be highly strategic and getting collaboration between what was two councils, and we've brought in Western Bay because we can see value in that. So we just have to be careful that we're not overlapping the public transport committee, meetings, which will be, I think it's next week, couple of weeks. Yeah. So that's just that. So that's any further matters arising from that last meeting? There have been none. We'll move on. Governance matters, terms of reference and membership. And Oliver, you're going to address this one.
Koto Katoa. Thank you, Chair. And through you, the report in front of you is a relatively short and simple one. Members will recall that in the latter half of last year, we went through and looked at the function and membership of this committee. That produced some draft terms of reference, which have now been to Tauranga City Council and Bay of Plenty Regional Council and adopted. And we have it on good authority that they'll also be going to the Western Bay District Council for adoption in due course. This paper just brings those updates back for members to note, and you'll see that you've got the 3 resolutions in front of you. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? So the resolution. Crowther.
I was just going to check, especially with our Deputy Mayor here, whether there was, so there's not provision for an alternate from Western Bay, but there is from the other 2 councils. I was just checking that's where we left it off, but I presume it's still fine for the other members of the respective councils to be in the room but not to be sitting in the decision-making table. Is that the way we are seeing it?
Yes. The mayor didn't think that there was need for an alternate for them. Historically, the alternates didn't sit at the table, but we're happy for them to, as long as as long as it doesn't protract the meeting too much. We want to keep it really focused. If we find an issue that the mayor can't attend, I'm happy that an alternate comes, but of course he wouldn't have voting rights. So you might just see how that works out. We might have to amend. Yeah, you need to put your speaker on.
It doesn't seem right to me to be precluded from voting because the mayor's unavailable. I mean, what's the point of having membership on the committee if there's a risk it might be denied just because they're unavailable?
So that's something that you can take to your committee, to your council, and when you come back,
Seek an amendment.
Seek an alternate to be as well for when he's.
Through you, Chair, just reviewing the terms of reference here, I think it's at the discretion of Western Bay when it goes through your council to suggest an alternate if you wish.
Okay, so the recommendations there on page 14 and 15, there's 3. Would anyone like to move? Councillor McMillan has moved all 3. So that's receive the report, note the updated terms of reference, and notes the membership of the committee as contained in it. Seconded by Councillor Kurak. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So the project updates. The first one is the Tauranga Public Transport facility concept layout, page 31. Oliver.
Through you, Chair. Matthew Kilpatrick is unavailable today, so we've got Andrew Williams and Colm Hartigan from TCC presenting this report.
Hello, councillors, and happy Valentine's Day. It's nice to be here with you all. I can run through the BOPRC projects first, if you like. So the first one on the list that I'll just try and jot down some key points with some key ones. So the RPTP is currently commencing its review. So that will start, it's just started internally. We'll have 2 workshops with the PTC this year and 1 in the new triennium. And that document will be adopted later in 2026. Moving on to the on-demand service, the fares have been increased, so they've gone up to $5, and they go live on the 28th of April. That was based on a PTC decision late last year. The National Ticketing Solution is a massive project for our council. It's an organisational priority and taking up a lot of staff time, but will be really awesome when those that technological solutions rolled out onto our buses will make access to the bus services much easier than what it is today. The fare review for our whole of network has been completed as well. And the base fare is now $3.70, but that won't go live until NTS is delivered. So we're looking at probably mid to late this year, all things going to plan with NTS. That is a national level project though, so some of those timeframes or most of those timeframes are outside of our control. Wrapped up in the fares review process was the fact that we are currently in negotiations essentially with NZTA on private share targets. So that's a target for us to ensure that we recover more of our costs to deliver the PT service. And we'll be taking that to our council next month, I think. Yeah. And then lastly, I think, is the PT facility, which is a lava site on the corner of Spring and Durham Street, which is the image that you've got there that you mentioned there, sorry. Chairman. So if you've got any questions, I'm happy to take those, but there's just a quick update from myself on those key projects.
Questions, councillor Currick?
Thank you, Andrew. I've been asked by a member of the public as to when and where some key decisions will be made around the on-demand service. So I imagine there's some budgetary issues which will be covered by the regional council in terms of its budget, etc. But will something come to us, and how will that evolve in terms of the on-demand service moving forward and some of those key decisions?
So the trial expires, I think, in late September this year. So its future at this point is not yet known. So it's part of our annual plan discussion. So that will be a matter that comes forward to our council and will be managed by the Public Transport Committee, firstly. But it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 6 months once that fare revenue hopefully increases with the change in the that fare. So yeah, I think we'll have decisions fairly shortly, probably in the next month or so, subject to council decisions at this end at regional council. But we can definitely keep you updated on that.
Oliver?
Just further to Andrew's response. So the trial, as it is currently, enjoys 51% funding assistance from NZTA. We do not have funding assistance beyond the end of the current trial. So if there was any extension considered, that would likely need to be fully at the cost of the regional council.
Thank you, Oliver.
So just a clarification, you said that the fare is going up to $5, but with the card, it's $4, isn't it? It's $5 for cash.
Correct, yeah. So the current fare is the same as our PT Flex services. So it's $2.72 with a B card and $3.40, I think, without the B card. But it's been shifted above that line because it's a premium service. So the PTC recognised that, and that's where we've landed.
Is Gary Maloney still on? Can't see him there. Gary, NZTA, have you got any comment with regards to likely, what we're seeing with this on-demand trial and stuff? Haven't updated us on the patronage, but my take on it was that we were doing that route where we had a fixed service bus was doing 300 to 500 people a month, and we're now doing 3,500 to 5,000 a month, to 5,500 a month. So we're really looking at a tenfold increase, but it was the profitability that worried me, and that's why we've reviewed the fares. Is there any indication from NZTA as to, because we're doing this fare change in April and it runs out, so it's only going to have 6 months to bed in, but so we won't know. We'll know by the end of September the effect on patronage, but we did survey our people and got a pretty positive response to say that it was a premium service and they loved it, and that's why staff have recommended that fare increase. Any comments from NZTA?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Speaking a little out of my lane because funding's not my thing, but it will depend on a couple of things. One is what your evaluation throws up, and secondly, in terms of funding, we'll require a conversation with agency investment advisor around whether or not it's worth taking cost scope adjustments through to our hierarchy. That said, the current activity class is pretty under pressure at the moment, so.
So what are you saying?
It's
a very
if you don't ask, you don't. If you don't ask, you don't get. But there's not a lot of spare money sitting around, and when you look at what it's subsidising per passenger, it's a high number currently.
Yep, and we recognise that. We recognise that, and we are trying to address that. in our fare reviews overall. This council is very cognizant of the low fare box recovery and the fact that we have to do something about it. So thank you for that. Any questions, Councillor Crowther?
Do we sort of have a plan for 5 years down the track for our CBD facility? Is it sort of the default plan to go back on the street because Te Manawataki is finished, or is there some other plan in the background, or do we just not have a plan?
That's a good question. I think that comes back probably to funding allocations and the public transport service and infrastructure business case, which is currently not fully on the shelf, but sort of half on the shelf, waiting for next steps in funding, because that business case would allow through routing, which would actually negate the need to have layovers at all. So that's why we've got that site for 5 years, in the hope that we can start through routing. But between now and then, I don't know whether we're going to get the money. So that's where we're at now.
I often hear the sort of phrase that it would negate the need for layovers and things. How confident are you of that, given that the journey times are so inconsistent in Tauranga? So although reliability has improved compared to what it was, it's still a significant issue. And I'm just aware that if you have buses going from, let's say Tauranga West, when it comes on stream from Papamoa East, it's a very long journey time. And to actually not lay over means they have to be within a bit of a narrow window once they hit those super stops in the city. So are we working with a high degree of confidence that we won't need some layover facility?
I'll take that question, Councillor Crowther, through you, Chair. The Public Transport Services and Infrastructure business case was developed in a landscape where the assumption was that a number of key projects to improve public transport reliability would be funded, and that is not the landscape that we now find ourselves in. As Andrew suggested, the reason that we've gone for that 5 years is to buy us the time to understand what the strategic direction is, whether we are continuing with the plan that we all developed under the last government, or whether we need to pivot. And that is not something that Regional Council can solve alone. That requires all of the partners around this table to understand how we move forwards and deliver what the city needs under the funding conditions that we now find ourselves under.
So, and this is where we need to be thinking strategically together. Just to lay on the table the issues that our regional council is facing is we have all our contracts coming up for renewal within the next 2 to 3 years, and in the past they were under PTOM, the Public Transport Operating Model, which we had by legislation had to abide by certain things like a 9-year contract, and then that was developed in 2012. Minister Parker under the Labor government tried to he amended the act to call it the Sustainability Transport Framework, Public Transport Framework, which was designed to bring emission-free buses and all that in, but he never got through the Act of Parliament under the Land Transport Act, an amendment to it, to actually bring that into law. The current government has also spent the first year, and it still isn't law, and we have a new Minister of Transport. My concern as chair of the Public Transport Committee for the region is that unless we can get this urgently done, how can we plan a service that relies on a 9-year contract where any variation within the 9 years generally costs us like $1 million or whatever, to do variations. It is not a user-friendly, the PTOM as it stands is not user-friendly. It urgently needs, and even today, this morning, I went and spent some time with Minister McLeay to talk to Minister Bishop directly about that issue, because it's really urgent, so that we can actually, we need more discretion as councils versus government in the setting of our contracts. So that, and that's a specific issue for the Western Bay, the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, because we're one of our is the contracts, and there's probably other things, and that's I'd be interested in knowing. That's the big hairy problem. What did Paula used to call them? The a wicked problem that we have, because in our long-term plan we have budgeted from going from 50 million last year to 60 million this year and through to 100 million in the 10-year plan, and that's just about all targeted rate. So that comes, most of it's on Tauranga, and it's not sustainable for our ratepayers. And central government have said that they're reevaluating the funding that they've got available. So it's all very well to say we want to do this for free and that for free, but someone has to pay. And at the moment, it's our regional council, which is the same ratepayer as you have, or Western Bay has. And I would be really keen to understand if you've got any similar wicked problems with regard to transport. Yeah. Michael.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and sort of well said, but in addition, I think, and to answer the question, Councillor Crowther, is it's difficult to be strategic right now. And what staff are providing you are short to medium term options that give you a chance at another option in the future. And I think to be fair to the teams, that's what we're trying to provide. And we are caught betwixt and between a collapsing program of local road improvements from Wakawatahi, and there's still the need to finish off the things that we started. So I guess that's one of the roles of the committee is what's the course out of this? And I think some of that work, because we're going to go into a work plan later this afternoon, that we could identify for ourselves is to try and figure out those next steps. And just in echoing of all the other points. Thank you.
So that, I'll just finish this one. That brings us on to the it's under 4.9, the 4.9, the school services review. If you've probably all read in the paper, I've got a copy of the page of all the increases in school services for the coming year. And so what's the that when we did this, change the service and the contract in 2018, the idea was that the schools would not have a separate service. They would come under the public transport system and take the public transport. And of course, within days of that operating, it was in 2018, it was a nightmare. And we ended up having to put school bus services on. But a challenge for us strategically is how we deal with that. And it's coming up right now, but where schools are asking for increased bus numbers. But the likes of schools on Cameron Road, for instance, where there is a bus going by every few minutes because of different services running up and down them, should we be supplying school bus services for the boys' college, the girls' college, the primary school, somehow this has become, it used to be the Ministry of Education, and they passed it on to us, but can our ratepayers continue to afford, we have to actually address this, I think, in the next, it might not be this, certainly by the time we come to the new contract, because it's just getting unsustainable from a ratepayer point of view. I'm thinking of the ratepayers, and we have a lot of people who are on limited income or pensioners in our community, and we can't double the rates for our ratepayers. So that's another challenge that we need to address strategically, and I think that's where this committee can probably help strategically, but at the end of the day, it does come down to the Public Transport Committee to make the determination on it. So now, your turn.
I'd echo all those comments from everyone. I think we need to get some strategic thinking going, but I think at the moment the sort of tactical response is what I'm hearing is probably what we're limited to of that. And on that note, 4.10, the bus network review, I'm wondering how excited I should get or not by this, and whether it will have an opportunity to address, for instance, the example I often give is the number 62 route being one of those few that's still not operating on the normal frequency. There was talk of doing a few other amendments to the scheduling, etc. Is that something that could be within a review, or is it a more limited scope, likely until we get a new funding situation?
Yeah, I think it comes down through the chair, excuse me. I think it comes down to the will of the council and the ability to pay for it, because we've got the onset of EVs and emission-free buses, which at this stage is looking like it'll cost about 20% more just to keep the same level of service, because that cost from the operator will come straight back to councils and ratepayers. But yeah, beyond that, if there's an appetite for increasing frequency and reliability and anything else that comes with delivering PT, then it's going to cover the cost as well, probably more than 20% of current costs. Yeah.
Councillor McMillan.
Yeah, thanks. Just with the equitable fares solutions, is there a marketing plan that goes with that in terms of public awareness? Because I'm thinking with the border band, people in the Western Bay might be keen to know that their fare into the city is actually going to be much more reasonable, and that that's a good news story. So are we sending out a media release, and are we also doing some Western Bay District sort of promotion of what those bus fares are?
Yeah, through the chair. So as part of the fares review, but in particular the implementation of that, we will be utilising our comms budget to support making sure that the communities understands what the cost of that will be, and if there's a particular appetite for a specific area or higher PT users, to ensure that they get the message, we'll make sure that that's made clear to them. But definitely, yeah.
Any further? Thank you. So what are we on to now? So we need that report moved, didn't we?
So we'll do
Tauranga City's part? Yep.
So, I'll take it mostly as read. You'll have seen that we're under construction with our bus stops on Durham Street, most likely. So that is item one, and it's the item under construction that's the most pressing to this committee from a construction perspective, I would imagine. Apart from that, happy to take any questions. Connecting the People 15th Ave is still awaiting a decision from NZTA's board for funding.
Yeah, so just referring to 3.2 stage 2, the Takatumu North Link stage 2, I understand that in line with the GPS, the Waka Kotahi are no longer putting the shared cycle walkway there. I'm just wondering what the process is if people had the appetite to make a recommendation to NZTA to future-proof that, so that, understanding current government settings aren't going to allow for that, but to make it easy to retrofit in the future and to sort of for NZTA to commit to enabling that land to be easy to retrofit? Should that go to the Regional Transport Committee? I did mention it to Lyle, or can we make the recommendation directly to you if people have an appetite for that? Nairi, or?
Do you want to comment on that, Nairi?
You're correct in terms of the GPS and the direction that we've been given. The Takatimu North Link 2 obviously is still in relatively early investment case stages. I think that if you wanted to communicate that kind of information to us, I think putting it through the Regional Transport Committee is probably a good process to use.
Great, thank you. So through you, Chair, I'm wondering if we could, if this committee can make a recommendation to that committee, or how does that process work?
Do we need to?
So I'm not a member of that committee, so I'm sort of putting it through this committee if that's possible.
Yep. We'd be happy to hear a resolution if you got some wording.
Well, it would be
Meeting.
along the lines of make a request to NZTA to future-proof or enable the retrofitting of the shared walk cycleway, so to commit that land for future funding possibilities. Yeah.
That's all we could do. Mike, you've been ex-NZTA, so any thoughts?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and for my sins, yes, I was. I think if we could work on some words. I think it's important to make sure that we're referring to the right part of stage 1 or stage 2.
Yeah.
And if it's in reaction to a recent piece of
it's from a
communication,
newsletter that's just come out this week about stage 2 specifically.
then would be subject to standing orders that are currently in this committee meeting around its connection to the Regional Transport Committee. But I think I'm happy to write something down and go from there. Will help.
Thank you.
Do that. Welcome, Mayor Denya. Recognise that you haven't got voting rights yet, but you've certainly got speaking rights today. We won't go through the rigmarole, but welcome. Councillor Kurek.
Thank you. Just taking advantage of the fact we have now got the Mayor of Western Bay and the Deputy present. On Monday, TCC is going to consider an item at one of its committee meetings around some issues that came out of the stage 1 tolling of the TNL subsequent to the decision by the Minister in December. And just thinking about, moving forward on some of those issues, because we want a clarification around a number of issues, that our sort of support for the tolling was subject to. But sort of the decision was made, and now we're looking at, hey, what do we do about the situation? So if I can just get a bit of feedback with our partners here about what your position was in terms of the submission to the TNL tolling, like, there are issues like should or legally could tolls be taken on stage 1 to pay for stage 2, etc. But James, could you update us, or John, around what was your position and the submission to the TNL tolling?
Yeah, it's a little bit on the spot, so I'm just recalling exactly what our submission was. I think we highlighted the inequity of Tauranga currently having 2 of the the 3 toll roads, and that that was it would improve over time, but that's what it is at the moment. There was some consideration of if the toll is too high, then you defeat the point of having the TNL, and for us as a council, it creates an issue whereby if you're still having a effectively a major state highway on a local road, which our ratepayers are paying for, then that's a lot of maintenance that we have to pay for. So there's a little concern about that, but we were also cognizant that the fuel tax regime is essentially broken or very nearly broken, and that we have to pay for a new road somehow, and that tolling is probably the way to go, at least for the time being. So it was generally supported, but there were a few issues like inequity and maintenance costs and so on.
I ask you, did you, West Bay, receive any feedback or answers to those questions or concerns expressed in your submission? Are you aware? Because that's our issue.
Yeah, I don't think we received specific feedback, but I know actually another point we made was that if you were to come in on the TNL and then that joins up with Takitimu Drive, if you turned left into the CBD, then there's no further gantry. But if you turned right towards, funny enough, Barks Corner and our council offices, there was a gantry. So there was a concern that you'd go through a gantry for TNL2, a gantry for TNL1, a gantry for Takitimu Drive, for me personally, to get from Keddy to Barks Corner, and if you start doing 3 tolls twice a day, that's really quite a lot. So what they did do was they have said that if you've gone on the TNL and paid a toll for that, you wouldn't have to pay an extra toll for Takitimu Drive. So that I don't know if that was a direct result of our feedback, but it responded to what we argued. Absolutely.
Thank you, James. Regional Council, do you recall?
We haven't had a discussion on it as such, I think, Oliver.
So there was a submission from Bay of Plenty Regional Council, so it covered the majority of the issues that you have highlighted. So just looking through the submission here, sort of general support for tolling, but noting the inequity challenges, noting the potential issue with users picking up multiple charges, and also noting that public transport services are not exempt from tolls. Those were the salient points of our submission.
Great, thank you for that feedback. It's quite helpful and it might help our discussion on Monday.
Any further issues?
Through you, Chair, there is some conversation going on amongst staff around this issue, which Andrew can provide a short update on.
Through the chair, so the RTC, our Regional Transport Committee, resolved at its last meeting to write back to NZTA and the Minister relating to concerns around the decision that was made. The committee will be pleased to know that that double tolling has been taken off the table, but there's still some concerns there, and staff are in the midst of writing a letter on behalf of Councillor Thurston, who's online. And there are staff level discussions between ourselves, Western Bay and TCC staff at the moment to support that letter.
If
I may, Mr. Chair, I saw a draft of that letter, and I did have some concerns. So I would ask that because I think Councillor Shirley moved it and I seconded it, but the way it read was not quite how certainly I would have intended it. So I would quite like a little bit of sign off, but a little bit of collaboration on that, just to make sure we get the right message.
Noted. Councillor Crowther.
One of the concerns of TCC as well was the peak time versus off-peak differential. Did either of the other councils express a view on that? Because I mean, it's not a capacity issue. It's more just that there will be people who will be moving around with probably little discretion for when they get their kids to Watamoto College in some cases or wherever they're going. And effectively it will be a sort of a peak time, a congestion tax without the congestion, basically.
Does sound like our staff will be informed of some of the issues from what I've heard here, and some of those questions could be answered on Monday by our staff. Yeah, is that you're talking?
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct. So I wouldn't want to pass any comment on that TCC have made, but I know that they've got a number of other issues that they wanted to raise in said letter as well. So it's just a matter of getting all on the same page, literally. So yeah, but support that discussion that you have with your staff on Monday. Cheers.
Yep, the wording as that Mike has drafted is ready to have a look at. Can we just put it up?
It's not Mike.
Oh.
So it's not drinking.
Oh,
Okay.
2 minutes? Yeah, sure. We can,
Just to, through the chair, just to help the room for 1 moment, I'll just go back to one of our items in the Public Transport Operations Facility, which is in the Bowplenty Regional Council's update. We lifted the public exclusion on that item, so just wanted to let the committee know that that is now in the public, and we are actively advertising that site. Well, not actively advertising, but we've let the media know about it, and there has been a media release on that from Regional Council. But
just remind us when will we see work on the ground?
So we take over the lease on the 1st of April, and then work will commence shortly thereafter, with hope that the site shall be operational by late July, early August. There is part of the reason why that construction is a little bit delayed is because with the Durham Street bus stops at the southern end shifting, we actually need that work to be completed before we can build the entry exit point off Durham Street, because of the bus stops and temporary interchange are sitting alongside that site.
Thank you. Councillor Crowther.
Wonder if does either Regional Council or NZTA have any indication of a date when we will know what the sequencing and timings will be, and what costs for that matter, for the RONS project stage 3 and 4 and Tauranga?
I'm not aware that we know from a regional council perspective, but my agency colleagues might have that information to hand.
I could speak to that through the chair. So for Tauranga, we are currently, investment case is currently going to our board in April, and it will be after that meeting. And obviously after those, that meeting is confirmed, the outcome and the results are confirmed. And so that's for the Tauranga West RONS. For the TNL stage 2, that's a little further down the track. Probably likely to see something following the board meeting, potentially in May.
Councillor McMillan.
Thanks, Nari. Just wondering if a prospective regional deal or sub-regional deal would potentially have any impact on those timeframes, or not?
Through the chair, so that's probably question I couldn't really answer at this stage. Obviously, the regional deal information, the proposals are only just gone in. I would think that it would not have necessarily any, it would potentially be later down the track that that regional deals and any outcomes there would affect timing for the ROMs. So yeah, that's probably a question that I can't give you any detailed information answer on.
Okay, thank you.
Can Tauranga staff give us any information just before we get the thing on the Arataki facility, how it's going, any fish hooks, any problems?
Through to you, Mr. Chair. It's going swimmingly, apart from some graffiti and a few other sort of minor construction issues we've just experienced. But at this stage, we're pretty pleased that it hasn't been, I guess, heavily vandalised or anything like that, and it's working pretty well within that community. So we haven't had any kind of negative feedback. Just to contrast that, we had a lot of feedback about Arataki beforehand, and now we're not getting much. So that in our books is a very successful outcome, particularly now that we're out of that community and we can leave it alone.
Thank you. So we've got the recommendation, which has been moved by Councillor McMillan. Are you happy with that wording up on the screen?
Are you asking me?
No, I'm asking Councillor McMillan. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Crowther seconded it, so it's open for discussion. Yep.
I'm just very happy to support it. I think, I haven't seen any indications of potential users or cost benefit, but I think there's nothing to lose by us pushing for this, and it will potentially be a significant benefit if, the alternative is for Western Bay Council presumably to fork out a significant chunk of money to connect up to a piece of infrastructure that will just effectively dump people into Puna by a busy road due to the toll. So, to me it seems worth a try. And I keep thinking of Councillor Thwaites and his vision for if we can't get an Omakaroa school, we could get the Omakaroa kids biking down the side of the TNL to the Tauranga school.
Medina, can you enlighten me? Is there any off main road options coming through from the likes of Omakaroa through to the Puna, for instance?
So there is an existing cycleway that takes you from Omakaroa through to the Waiwa Bridge and beyond. Yeah. It's fair to say that it does have some on-road elements, not the main road, but through to Puna. It's on-road, a mixture of on-road and off-road, and it's also relatively circuitous. It's more, I would say, it's more for recreation than a cycle as fast as you can from where you live in Omakaroa to Tauranga to work kind of situation. So I mean, if I may comment on this, even though I can't vote on it, I think there is merit in it, in that, if you're building a large 4-lane road, the extra space you need for a cycle lane would seem to me to be pretty modest. And if it can be included, or consideration at least, then that seems worthwhile. Because otherwise you're just going to have to retrofit it probably eventually anyway, and that will cost time and money and disruption.
Andrew,
Yeah.
can I say something?
Yeah, just a minute. We've just got.
Sure. Yep. Thank you. I just to reinforce what the mayor has just said, and I think if you look at the motion, to me it just requests evaluation of the cycleway and to see whether it's worthwhile. And while I accept that does cost a sum of money, it's not much in the scheme of things. And to go a step further, if it's to be built, it's sensible to build it at the beginning. But this, obviously we can't vote, but I'm very supportive of the concept of evaluating the proposal.
Okay, councillor Thurston.
Chairman, if you ask me as part of the resolution, I can pick it up and talk to NZTA, and to fast track things, ask them to report on it at the next meeting on the 21st of March for Andrew Corkill to include it in his report to us. But no, just for information, Mayor Daniel, the next meeting is the 21st of March, and I noticed that there's also a clash which may impact on TCC2. There's a Zone 2 meeting that same day, same time in Te Araha, which is a bit of a bucket, dare I say, but one of those things. But no, I'll get onto this recommendation straight away for you, everybody.
All right, well, that's assuming that it passes. Councillor Crowther.
In light of what our Western Bay colleagues have said, and given that they can't vote on the motion yet, which is somewhat frustrating, I'm wondering if the mover of the motion would think about whether we should actually amend the wording to actually say to include this, to include the cycleway, and then along the line, I don't know the exact words, but or at worst to at least include the future proofing of the route.
So my understanding is that because they're aligning with the GPS, there's no way they're going to include it. So that's why they announced in their newsletter that it's gone burger, and so are many other cycleways around the Motu. So I'm kind of clutching at the bottom bar here to say, well, okay, if you've pulled it out, let's keep that space and future-proof it so that when there is funding or a change in government, then it can be retrofitted easily. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's about the highest I could possibly aim for right now. Otherwise, it's sort of saying, no, central government, we really do want this, and then they're just going to push back and say, well, no, you can't have it. But I mean, I like your aspiration, so maybe we could.
In that case, maybe I wonder whether a stronger wording would just be to include future proofing of a shared cycleway or something like that, rather than just to get. I think that was the point the deputy mayor made was. So I take on your point, Councillor McMillan, but maybe we could just firm it up a little bit by saying include the future proofing rather than just evaluating it and then not including it.
Yeah, no, I'd be really happy with that. Good idea.
So that you're the seconder anyway, so you're wanting to. I personally thought your point was very valid. I think if you to include future proofing, you might find you get a negative answer to that, and then that's put it dead. Whereas if you get them to evaluate it, at least it keeps it on the books. So be careful what you wish for.
I think, Lyle, are you suggesting we amend this to just delegate, or not delegate, but request that you speak to NZTA? Because you said you will.
I was going to ask Andrew Corkill to include it as part, tell her what's going on here.
Brilliant.
Tell her what the sentiments have been expressed at the Joint Public Transport Committee meeting today, and ask him to pick up on it and include it in his direct report to us on the 21st of March.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I'd love to delete the evaluate if possible, if people were to agree.
But I'm not overly confident that it'll go anywhere, to be honest. Because we all know multimodal is dead in the water. And if I get told once again from NZTA there's no tin in the tin, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know.
Mr. Chair, if I just suggest a different wording that might solve it, just say request them to evaluate and or future proof a shared cycleway.
And or. That I think what the second alternative is too harsh to get it. So I think I think you need to be realistic. We're not because we're not going to get it actually included. Yeah, if you ask for it to be included, it won't happen.
Preserve the
I want to include
opportunity.
the land. I don't want to include the cycle. Oh, I want to. but-
Just in other words, preserve the opportunity for. Pathway.
Yeah.
So my wording, just to help the governance, request them to evaluate and or future-proof a shared cycleway. Take the ing off.
And perhaps at the end, and if not,
No,
preserve the opportunity.
yeah, that's, yeah. I think that's got a chance of going somewhere, whereas if you get to go any further, we'll struggle. So is the mover and seconder happy with that wording as it is now? And slash or. Are you?
While we're waiting.
No, we're just, before we need clarification. Is the mover happy with the wording as it stands now? So it's, that's the mover and seconder have altered. So that's the resolution. Have you got something to add to the conversation, Councillor?
As I said to my colleague, Councillor McMillan, just while we're waiting there, my interpretation of future proofing is sort of over-speccing or over-capacitizing a route to accommodate the future demand.
The
Not to
cycleway was
preserve the
already in
opportunity.
there, so they've just pulled it out. So it's already been spec'd, it's already been designed, it's already been architecturally planned.
Okay.
They're just pulling it out. So.
All right, I'm going to put the motion as I do. Got your speaker on?
This is getting passed to the Regional Transport Committee. Perhaps they could wordsmith it, given a bit more time to accommodate the suggestions that we're making.
All right, I'm moving the motion as it stands. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. And you have now, unfortunately, it's 3 minutes past the hour. And I was told by Mike, if we got this through this, he didn't say about the workshop. He said if we got through this within the hour, he'd shout us all a drink. But we've missed you. You're okay. You're off the hook because we went 3 minutes over. Is there any further general business? So I will close this meeting. Thank all those for participating.
Sorry, we just second this to receive this report.
Oh, we have to receive the report, though. We do, sorry. We can't close the meeting yet. There's a
I've got another
resolution.
question though.
I haven't done the resolution yet, so you can just.
Okay, it's a really tiny detail, but just in line with Toi Moana, looking at the operations facility, the lay-by, right at the very end of the report, page 31.
Yeah.
I just want to check that the Becker design with the hedging is going to be a native planting, not exotic. So just, I mean, I know that's a detail, but just in line with who we are.
Yep, through the chair, yeah, happy to check that detail and come back to you, and we can probably make that happen. I think there was some native in there, but I can't recall, but I'll get back to you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so will someone move that we receive the presentation? Oh, no, that's not the right one. Where is it? That we receive the report for the project's update. I'll move it. Councillor Crowther will second. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. With that, I'll close the meeting and thank you all. And you haven't said anything yet, Sean. No, we've closed the meeting and now we're going to go into a workshop. So now we move into, well, that's how I saw it. Is that right?
We can do it that way.
Well, it's either a meeting's a meeting and a workshop's a workshop, so I'm going to open the workshop with the same provisos as before, and Sean, you're very welcome to put your oar in. Who's going to do this one? Oliver.
I'll just introduce it, Chair. Through you, this is a very high-level workshop. We're conscious this is the first meeting of the year for this committee. So staff from both the Regional Council and the City Council just wanted to give committee members and those at the table, in person or virtual today, just the opportunity to feedback on some of the aspects of the programme, but also talk to us about your priorities over the next 12 to 18 months, so we can make sure that we consider those as we go through our programming. I'll hand over to Andrew and Sean, who are going to take you through this discussion.
Thank you, Oliver. So I've just got a few slides to run through, but I feel like this group and this committee has a fairly good handle on most of the context, so I won't labour on much of it at all. This is a very cut down version of the committee's purpose and role. Again, I won't read that, but as Ollie mentioned, we're largely focusing on a bit of a draft transport work program, and looking to understand from councillors how what they can do to make recommendations for improving the transport system. So so the PT context, again, a lot of what I've said and others have said today is probably enough context rather than me relitigating any of this. So we all know that funding is constrained. I think the rubber's hitting the road with the way the LTF is now it's just got my computer going off there. The NLTF is impacting us at a PT level in terms of the way we're now going out to procure our operations. We're looking to, as I mentioned, procure services at a 20% increase in cost just to allow for the same level of service. We're faced with private share targets as well. So yeah, not much more that I want to add to that context. But Sean, was there anything from a TCC perspective that you wanted to?
It was just to add, at least from a PT context on our key movement corridors, is that budgets for infrastructure are very constrained. So the goal, at least for the next few years, is to really just try to get as much as we can out of the current infrastructure that we do have. And that's part of the idea of setting a work program with yourselves, is that we can talk about that strategic direction. We can keep you over that strategic direction and provide that ability so that when big things do come online, we're able to use it to the fullest. But until then, we are able to keep the network moving and keep everybody within the sub-region moving as well as we possibly can within our constraints.
Thanks, Sean. And the next set of slides are essentially a series of questions which are not intended to be answered directly, or they're basically just conversation starters. So Sean and I thought that we'd open up the room to start the conversation with some of this. So I'll hand over to you, Sean, because this is more probably some of the questions that you posed initially.
Yes, so these are the big questions that from the conversations over the time that we had the previous iteration of this committee, we heard. Noting that these are very, very big questions, and they're very philosophical questions. So we have over the next couple of slides broken these questions down into more bite-sized, more manageable questions, with the idea that that's then able to be discussed and able to be prioritised on where you would like to spend your own time, but also your staff's time to focus. So, for example, on how can the transport network move more people? That's a question that we could spend the entire year sitting around this table talking about, but we've broken that down into some more manageable questions from how you would like to handle from a governance level, that philosophical approach.
To Sean's very good introduction there. As staff, we're cognizant that it can be easy to lose the focus on the ultimate goal in a landscape that is changing quickly. So even with the absence of immediate increases in funding, we want to make sure that we as staff, but also you as governors, are clear on how we can keep moving towards these goals.
I think it'd be quite useful to hear from Gary Maloney about fare box recovery, because I recognise that funding is our biggest issue for public transport to get fund. There's constraints on funding, and I think it's working against us that we are currently sitting at 60 cents, which is the lowest. Second lowest in the country on fare box recovery. We've started to address it, Gary, in our fare box charging, but of course that won't come into effect until the national ticketing system is implemented, and now that's been pushed out on us. And for the school service, it won't come into effect until the next school year. So we've made some hard decisions to try to work it, but is that recognised by NZTA? That I want you to recognise it and pass it on, that we recognise the problem, but we can't do anything until we really do need the national ticketing and for both our fare box recovery and our school systems. You got any comments, Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Oliver can probably attest to this, that as we've been working through this increasing private share discussion, we've had some pretty robust conversations, and we've got to a point where we've conveyed to your council and others that we can move to that next step of in terms of the targets, the interim and indicative targets for the next couple of years, of looking for council sign off of those. If at a staff level we weren't supportive of that, there'd still be some more work to do there. I can't tell you what's going to happen when we do the next NLTP, but you're doing all the right things. You looked at your fares, you're going to be looking at your school services. In terms of the supporting information we got from council around private share targets, it told the story about what you can do and what you can't do. So you are doing the right things.
Okay, no, that's comforting.
Just further to Gary's comments there. So staff from the regional council have been working closely with agency staff. So we have agreed at an officer level what we feel is possible, and that will be coming to the regional council for seeking endorsements at the end of March. What I would say to your points, Chair, around the challenges we face in terms of needing certain systems to be in place to realise the additional revenue that we're seeking, that has been acknowledged by the agency staff as it underpins the forecasts that the regional council have put forwards.
Sean?
If you had more people on the buses, you'd be getting more revenue, right? So one of the areas that has been it's very cost effective, very high cost benefit ratio is the travel demand management side of things, and it's been shelved over the last couple of years. But that's an area where you might need to fund it because it's not going to come through central government funding. But if you can get more bums on seats, then you'll start to incentivize more. You'll get your revenues up. So just worth considering how you might do that.
I think you raise a really good point, and it's something that I've thought about, is how we could, the Wednesday challenge type thing. I've never been a strong supporter of that, but I am a supporter of going out to businesses and to try to actually partner with businesses to get them to participate in public transport systems. And I think that's something, as you say, we mightn't get funding for it, but it's something that we could look at doing, developing a strategy to do that ourselves, to try to start an incentive scheme. What's it take to get ourselves, to get businesses to support us with our public transport?
Through you, Chair, on both of those points. The fares review looks to achieve growth in addition to increasing revenue. So as well as increasing our fares in peak times, we're actually proposing to decrease fares in off-peak times. So actually grow markets where we have a significant amount of capacity on our services. So to your point, Sean, absolutely, if we can get more people onto the buses, of course, we will be able to collect more revenue. And the challenge at the moment is that a lot of our customers are paying a low or a completely free fare. So that does help. To the Chair's points, the national ticketing solution offers much more functionality in terms of being able to administer schemes. It's not impossible through the B card, but there's a lot of manual work required, a lot of staff resource required to administer those. So as a council, as staff, we're really excited by the opportunities. Until we see the final version of that system, we won't be able to describe to you exactly what that looks like. But we're informed that there will be substantial opportunities for councils to do more in that space.
Councillor
Another thing in the mix, I suppose, if you look at the whole transport and moving people approach, is something that people don't have appetite for, and that is the convenience of parking or the relative cost of parking. And I know that for those TCC elected members, it is a real challenge because there's a lot of noise from the public if you do charge for parking or you take parking spaces away. But to me, that has a direct impact with behaviour shift. If it's really easy to just pull your car up outside a shopping centre or whatever and not have to pay much versus paying to get on a bus and some inconvenience of waiting for a bus. So I don't know if in the mix with all of this, how much of that cause and effect and levers gets baked in as the whole system's approach, because obviously if you're pulling a lever desperately here to get bums on seats, and over here you're making it more convenient and free for people to park, then never the twain shall meet. So I don't know if anyone's got a comment on that, but I suppose it's just one of the things that is a real challenge.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not going to directly answer your question, I'm afraid, but I do want to run a slightly more challenging line of questioning and conversation here. At the beginning of the session, Chair, you challenged us to be strategic and stay strategic in this conversation. And what I'm sitting here thinking about as a staff member of Tauranga City Council, but also with my peers, is how do your staff move into the next 3 years, 6 years of what we have to do? And what is it, and I'm going to be a bit challenging, what is it we need from you in order to help us understand what are the right trade-offs and priorities and decisions? And these questions are here to help us try and sort of unpack that. But the question I have for you is that this committee will play a role in setting a direction for us to try and achieve, and this work plan is a way of you keeping us to a program of activity that helps us to achieve that direction. At this stage, your strategic directions is enshrined in smart growth, in UFTI, in what is the Tauranga system plan, and that's our marching orders right now. And so your teams will work together collaboratively, and I think we're doing that pretty well, in order to deliver on that strategic direction. the environment we have, that all that existed in has changed. And so now we have a significantly less amount of local government improvement funding. So right across the sector, the activity class for local road improvements is flatlined. So the government is investing in maintenance, it's investing in keeping the network the same. It's not investing in new things. You're very lucky as a local council to get a new project in this current GPS. That might change, but right now, for the next 3 years, that's what's happening. So you'll see us react to that. What also happening same in the PT infrastructure space, is that there's no money for that unless you're in Auckland, Wellington or Christchurch, and there's a big investment in PT infrastructure in those centres. But the areas like ours aren't going to attract that investment, hence the tactical responses that you're starting to receive. So we're responding to signals that are beyond our control, and we're offering you some solutions in that. There's also an element around the operational space. The GPS is very clear. Economic productivity is the direction. If your projects or your services don't offer something towards these things within the GPS, then they won't get funding at all. And we've heard ad nauseum, there's no more money. And so we have to be very good in what we offer and what we ask for in order to attract funding into our region. So what I'm sort of struggling and trying to attempt to explain is we need your help in order to help to prioritise, because the things that we do this year will have an effect in year 3. And we can start preparing for the next NLTP, or we can start preparing for the next series of projects or programs or responses. And we need to get some signals around what to do here, because the government is very clear about what it's looking for from its transport investment, and that is to keep our network maintained and renewed well. It is investing heavily in state highways that connect big urban areas together and relieve roading and freight style congestion problems. It is flatlining investment in local road improvements. That may change, and certainly not in the sort of alternative mode. So in that context, we have a plan, which is an OFD and through smart growth, and we have the ability to respond in that environment. And I think that's what I would see is, how do you help us to lead through that, and then let's set a work program that starts to unpack that and figure out what we can do. And we're here to help. You know, we can be innovative, we can be sneaky, we can be mischievous, we can choose our own direction, we can use the resources we have to make the best of what we have. And I think that's part of the challenges that we've got. So parking is absolutely a lever. How we invest in the passenger transport system and here is absolutely levers. Congestion is something that we do have to address, but there are things that we have to do that line up with some of the signals that we're getting from our central government. So I was just worried that our conversation was going to end up here, and actually we need to be here for now and then drop down into what's the how about it. So today I'm looking for some items there on our work plan that help us to answer these questions, but that we can get on with almost immediately, so that we can start to plan for the next change or the next run of projects, because the things that you've currently got in your programs were born in a different GPS. They will run through this financial year into the next, but after that, in about 18 months, 2 years' time, that's when we have the first real flush of newer projects or this kind of style GPS projects. And we need to be preparing for that front of activity, whether it be new contracts and PT services, increasing bums on seats, adjusting parking rates, or safety programs, anything like that. So I guess I'm asking that your sights set on that horizon to that degree. So sorry for the rant, but I think I'm just seeking some advice.
So let's give an example that, as far as I'm concerned, when we come to the next contract, so 2027, I'm talking Tauranga here, but it could equally be the same in Rotorua, Wakatani, whatever. We need to actually be in a position to think about doing things differently. And we've learned already from the on-demand service out there that we've got a tenfold increase in patronage by doing something innovative. And for me, I can see value in having a small, it might be tweaked differently to what we have now, but going around Mātua, Otamotai, that would come to, say, Brookfield as a hub, and collecting, so it doesn't come right into town. It still has to. There's still going to be a service that Brookfield might link from. I don't know, but that would require the PTOM to be changed to get that to work. But it just appears to me that we've got an opportunity in the next couple of years to change our service from having lots of big buses going around empty most of the day to having 15 or 20-seater buses doing a more on-demand style on the outskirts, linking up, and instead of having 37 big buses or whatever it is, bring that down to 15. You're still going to need, I don't know, but is that's what we actually have to think strategically as to and I'm not sure my idea is the right idea there, but that's the sort of thing we need to think strategically, but we can't do it unless we can get the PTOM changed. That's how I see it. Am I wrong?
I love that idea. If that was one of the work, that'd be great. I think it's about, it's taking that innovative Kiwi ingenuity type of approach to our limited funding. How can we've got a limited amount of money combined within the councils, within the agency. There's an amount of money, there's objectives, and we're currently spending it in a certain way. And it's one of the questions that we probably need to be answering is how do we do that in a way that's going to get better bang for buck? And that's an option, that's an idea. There's other ideas and there's barriers to delivering them. But part of it is about that work program might actually end up in part being what are you guys going to do over the next few years to be in a position to because value for money as a driver is an awesome driver. It's really important that we're getting the best, that we're leveraging as much out of what we're spending as we can. So using that over the next few years in terms of planning is probably.
But we've got to be customer. If we want to get bums on seats, we've got to be customer focused. We've got to supply our customer with what they want, so that they will use our service. Ron first, and then
just listening to this, I'm not sure that we've had lots of stabs at what we think the real problem is, but I think we should probably double check whether we do. And what do I mean by that? We're talking about bums on seats, for instance, but what about freight movements? What about people who have to have business trips within the day? What about school? There's an obvious one, school trips. What about through traffic? People coming from Auckland and going straight on down the Pacific Highway. What about commutes? There's people who commute from A to B and a bus trip's fine. And there are also the people who have to go from A to B to C to D to E. They go to the supermarket, pick up the kids, take them to sport and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's important to, one, identify what the problem is. I think another question we should ask ourselves is how are we contributing to those problems with the way we have settlement program, settlement patterns, whether we driving people to do things which they wouldn't otherwise do and they become inefficient, whether or not there's something we can do to, I don't know, but we've just in this conversation concentrated on just a slice of what the transport system does, and we might actually be missing what is causing the issues that we are seeing the symptoms of. And I think that would be a useful exercise to do, not today, but as part of your work plan.
So leads actually really into what I was going to say of, if we could go to the next slide, that reminding that this committee, we did change from a public transport specific committee to a transport system committee, noting that it's a focus on all users, not just PT users, but just wanting to remind people of that. The idea there being is that the system needs to operate together. Public transport is a very important component of getting people where they need to go, and a lot of the public, for one reason or another, choose not to use public transport. Some of them have reasons that are very valid, and they simply couldn't use the public transport network, and freight or other reasons are tradies are a very good reason for that. So it's about how do we get the transport system to operate as a transport system, focus on moving everybody, moving our users, and how do we make their trip as easy, frustration-free as possible. And a big answer to that is public transport. So just wanting to bring up that level a little bit higher. That's where these questions, these sort of sub-questions sort of came from, was, how do we understand those issues for the network user in a way that we can make sure that we can address them within our wider transport system.
I guess I had a few different thoughts. One of them is probably to make the use, say if I look at the next 2 years, to make best use of that time in terms of the strategies. So to get crystal clear on what you as regional council will deliver in 2027 and what the reality will be for that. But also to look in terms of strategically at, I don't think we should throw out AFTI, although I've been a critic of the process. I don't think we should throw out the TSP. So I think we have a fairly robust base for it all. But I still stick to my view that I've expressed a few times, that the people of Tauranga have no clue about any of that. And so I would use this 2-year window to also go out and actually ask people what they think of our sort of default plan and how they see that we could actually do things a bit differently to deliver the outcomes that they're wanting in their lives. Getting back to Councillor Scott's comments, I think that's highly relevant. I'd also use the 2 years to get clear in terms of, are we all happy as partner councils with what was agreed last year in the FDS, with the future development strategy in terms of our 30-year growth plan? There have been discussions that indicate maybe some people are not fully bought into that. Maybe that is the case, maybe that's not, but I think within that 2-year period, if we're not clear on that, we have the possibility that, in the background, there's this concern we will roll out new greenfield areas, which will require incredibly expensive public transport services, without really understanding the implications of that, and without even knowing if regional council can realistically fund any more services. So I would think that's kind of like my sort of strategic side. In terms of, I guess, the more, what Mike had talked about, I think, which was very helpful. I think we have to accept, from a city council point of view, we've got one project, and really of any significance, other than just finishing off PEI and Tariko, enabling which are localised. The one that's going to have quite a system-wide impact will be 15th Turret, and we're having a discussion at the city council meeting on Monday about that. But I'm hopeful maybe my staff could tell me I'm completely wrong, but I think that's going to have huge impact on our system. And it's going to, even if governance and staff do the absolute best job that we can do, it will be, I don't know if managed chaos is what's going to happen, but it's going to be really tough because it's just inherent in the whole structure of that piece of roading network. And at the end of it, I think we can get a good outcome, and it will tie in not only to our own city network, but to the new on-ramp to the TNL and so forth. So it will be a key piece of infrastructure, but that, I think, is it 2 years from 26 to 28? That's the critical window. We have to be very confident that not only do we have some alternative looking up there with the arterial route, that we have some plans for guiding our residents about where to go, but we have a lot of tactical response built into our public transport planning. And I think of when the free fares for school kids started was a response to Welcome Bay and the issues on the network there. And those issues will be exacerbated by the increase. Councillor Couric and I sort of saw some increases in travel on the roads around Papamoa just a couple of hours ago, and Councillor Taylor was there too. And I think we'd see this similar sort of pattern around that southern part of the city as well. And so I think we have to be really thoughtful around, do we want to invest proactively into some demand management responses before we start building that project? And if so, well, putting it bluntly, who pays? How does that work? So I think we need to be really, really clear on that in the next 6 months or so, probably, I would think, so that we can then implement it a few months later when we start building it. So that's the kind of lay of the land, probably as I see it right now, but also agree with pretty much all the other comments.
So the kicker to what you're saying is when we look at Cameron Road Stage 1 and the negative impact that had for at least 2 years, and then we put that behind us and look what we've got now, and we have a roading system that is actually working, that is not congested. We thought it was, but by putting extra lights in and that, I think Cameron Road Stage 1, on hindsight, has done a really good job. There's things we could have done better and going. So we have to learn the lessons of the implementation. But that's an example. If we had this discussion 2 years ago, we've been throwing our hands up in horror at even the mention of the word Cameron Road Stage 1, because businesses were going broke, and the thing. But so all credit to the city for actually getting on and getting that done when they did, because we've got through it. So that's what we've got to aim for, is actually looking where can we get. We need continuous, not necessarily quick wins, but quickish wins to build our roading infrastructure so that both freight, commuter and public transport benefits. Sir.
Cameron Road Stage 1 isn't as high a demand arterial as Councillor Crowther pointed out. The issues that will be before us with that route, 15th Avenue Turret Road, the traffic volume there will be far greater, and the buildability will be compromised by trying to manage the traffic around that project. And boy, I'm not looking forward to the feedback that we'll get. But that aside, now on the issue, when you look at central government and what it's trying to achieve, one that highlights to me perhaps where we need to look at is getting more traffic on our existing road, and what the central government is doing. One example is increasing speed limits. That means more flow through the road. Councillor Crowther mentioned that we drove from Papamoa a couple of hours ago. I was frustrated, and often what frustrates me is the cars in front of me. As we know, the light turns green. A few seconds later, some cars start moving, and the one in front of you, often you're waiting, are you going to move or not? And then there's a gap of about 100 or 50 metres or whatever it is between it and the car in front. And I look behind me, because I try and put my foot down and close the gap. There's another 50 metres behind me. This is Hewlett's Road. That is a huge cause of the lack of flow on that road. If we can do some comms or whatever and tell people watch the car in front of you. Don't be on your phone or don't get distracted. You know, when that car in front of you moves, you move too. Remember, if you look in your mirror, there's 100 or 1,000 cars behind you, and every millisecond that they choose not to move, there's a whole lot more congestion. One thing that reminds me of an initiative that was really helpful, and that was merge like a zip. You remember that? You know, before that, people didn't know what to do, and the merging resulted in a huge congestion because it just didn't work. Merge like a zip was beautiful, and suddenly we see now, you know, when two lanes converge, it's fantastic. People know what to do. Can we do something? Have some sort of initiative or communication process where we can say, hey, somehow put your foot down when the car in front of you moves. Think about the hundreds of cars behind you. You know, my wife even does this. Like, I often mention it, put your foot down, look in your mirror, there's 100 cars behind you. You know, she needs education too, but perhaps she doesn't listen to me because she's still doing it. I think that's what we need to think about. These small little things that could change behaviour, but will free up our network. Story of Friday afternoon.
Who's ready for a drink? Yeah, go.
I'm curious too. I'm genuinely interested in the sort of feedback from regional council. It doesn't have to be now, but at some point in terms of our, you know, Mr. Chair, you were praising the Cameron Road Stage 1. The one thing you will have noticed living nearby is that we haven't implemented the bus lanes. So they're all marked, all ready to go. That was supposed to be the big expensive part of the project, why all the curbs got shifted, but we're not using them. But as you point out, there's kind of no congestion there, which we all knew in the first place. So I guess the question is, now we've spent all the money and that's all done in the past and the markings are all there, it's going to come back to our council again. I think we picked it for touch and we've reset the line out at some point. And so do we gain tangible benefits by implementing bus lanes? And to be honest, I think it's a bit of a 50-50 call for a lot of our council. They're sort of looking at some really serious problems on the network elsewhere, and this one seems like a lesser problem, you know. And so then the question is, how will the public respond? And we don't know that sort of stuff because, as I said before, we haven't consulted on our transport plan, so we don't really know what the public thinks about it.
Before I go to Sean, you've got to remember that the bus lane was a requirement of central government to us to get funding, and I am absolutely sure that they will be required in time. When that, you know, I know staff would like them to be implemented, you know, the Bay of Plenty council staff probably want them implemented now, but in actual fact, right now, the congestion, as you say, doesn't seem to justify the necessity for them right this moment, but they will come, and at least we've got the infrastructure in place and people have got used to everything's there. I don't think you want to take it away. Yeah. Sean.
It will come from when?
Yes, so you will have actually may have noted the last bullet point on the slide is what should a managed lane strategy look like. So the conversation of, yes, we want to make sure that, for example, the bus lanes, I would I'd challenge and say we want to implement them before we need them, because by the time we need them, and that's as always the issue with this kind of thing, is that you don't necessarily want the issue, as much as it's easier to have the conversation with the community, you don't necessarily want the issue to arise to then have to solve the issue. You want to get ahead of the issue. Now, the question is, how early do you want to address the issue? And so we are doing some more digging on the data because, to your point, it's the data doesn't exactly justify for a right now recommendation for the bus lanes, but we do know that it's coming. So that is why we included a bullet point here of what does that managed lane study look like, that strategy look like, sorry, so that we do have a plan in place, because we don't want to, for example, find out in 5 years' time that, yeah, we need that bus lane, and then we've got to go through a process and we get a year down the track by the time we go through that process and say, okay, now we've just had a year of disruption that we didn't need. So it is a hard conversation to have. There is a lot of, going to be a lot of views on that conversation, but that is a strategic level item that I would suggest to this committee that you do want to address at a governance level.
So if we look at Cameron Road, the smart growth AFTI model was intensification of Te Papa Peninsula, and there's a potential, there was 1,170 or whatever it was state houses that were sold off to accessible properties that should be 5,500 houses replaced, as modern houses. So that puts another 4,500 people in Cameron Road, and it's but that was stopped, and I think that will continue. There is going to be intensification of the Te Papa Peninsula is a right process, I think, for our city, which once it's enacted fully, then that's when the value out of Cameron, you say Cameron Road's not that busy, but there was a big push to push cars on the motorway out to Welcome Bay, out to Tauranga, rather than going up Cameron Road, and maybe that's worked, but the whole concept, I think it was correctly premised, but it hasn't happened because of politics, got in the way. But that's not to say it won't happen.
Thank you. From a regional council staff perspective, I know anecdotally that our buses are held up along Cameron Road at certain times. And I think anything that can be done to support improving the frequency or reliability of those services is only going to support the rest of the strategic issues that we're looking at today. So I would implore that discussion to be an evidence-based one, and possibly utilising that bus lane as the catalyst for potentially more. But that's just a staff level position that we potentially need to provide more information on, which I am providing to Sean, but perhaps we need to go a little bit deeper.
Perhaps you can answer the question. If we have bus lanes on Cameron Road and actually elsewhere, at this point I'm not convinced we have enough buses to truly justify a whole bus lane, exclusively for buses. So I'm intrigued that you got T2 and T3 included there. I think that would have to be included in the mix, because if it was simply for buses, it would basically be an unused bus lane, and that would generate bad views from the public that it just was a waste of time. So maybe the T2, T3 is a way of using it to a significant degree and improve bus reliability, but not get that perception from the public that it's just a wasted asset.
Yeah, totally agreed. I think any bus lane down there could consider any options, whether it's T2, T3 or bus lane, and it could potentially be just peak hour bus lanes only, or peak hour T2, T3. There's multiple options that could be taken to support that position, and potentially trial something to see, well, what actually happens if we open these up for 6 to 12 months and collect some actual evidence rather than modelled evidence.
Sure.
I just had one comment following on from councillor Crowther around the disruption. I think that's something to really keep high on the agenda with the work plan. And it's not just the 15th Ave, it'll be some of the NZTA projects, sequencing of these, the bigger projects, because once 15th Ave is done, you'll have Barks Corner getting grade separated and all of these projects sequencing and how they'll, and then there may be others along State Highway 29A eventually. So how that disruption gets managed, 15th Ave is probably going to be the first major one, but then they'll continue as Hewlett's gets done and other work on State Highway 2, etc. So.
And just in an effort to maybe draw some structure around the conversation is what I'm hearing is that there's this mix of questions in the room around some strategic issues and some clarification around the strategic direction, whether that's been engaged with our communities, and there's a role for this committee to play to make sure that there's a more general understanding around what is the plan, why is it the plan, and that sort of elements. And to your point, Councillor Scott, around what's the actual problem, and being very clear about that. So this committee being clear on what those things are and mean, I think is a great piece of work for the staff to bring back to this committee and get that sort of generally agreed again. But it's very important to go and revisit those original principles. And I think there is some work items and mentioned on the FDS 15th Avenue. There's a bunch of things I think that are floating through right now that you want to hear about and to understand the dynamics before they're real and before they become something that's in the newspaper, that you'd like to have some consideration around them. And I think the things that are very much integrated in items around the whole transport system, or they have implications for each other and partners, are the kind of things that we should talk about here on a regular basis. So papers should arrive here about those topics, and this committee can give feedback to each of the organisations around it, including Waka Kotahi. I know they're not here at the moment, or they may be online, but
They're online.
yes. And I think, right now they are the biggest player in reshaping the transport system at the moment. So that'll be useful for us to be able to discuss those items here. A couple of the things that we had on our minds as well was things like parking and a joint operational approach around disruption, optimization program, which includes managed lanes and other things like that. So those are things that would align with the new GPS, take us in a different direction, but we can sow the seeds now. And so perhaps staff can bring some of those themes we're hearing back to as a list of things to do, some papers and some consideration to give you a bit more detail around those topics, including bus lanes I've got down here, and things like the intensification around Te Papa Peninsula. I think one of the things that we're suffering from here is there used to be a plan that went like this, and now that plan's now different. So if Cameron Road Stage 2 isn't going to be built in the time that it was originally planned, what's the implications for the network? What's the implication for the step change in passenger transport services that was planned on the back of that? And to present that back to you as this is what the future or the 10 years looks like now from a strategic network perspective. So if I'm hearing that right, is that the kind of things that you'd like to see populated in the work plan? And we can adjust it as we go. Things will come up and drop off, and we're more than happy to adapt to that. But I think very much important to start with that reaffirming and connecting with what the original strategy said, and either developing or not a level of comfort with that. Does that sound like a start of a plan?
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me. And I suppose the way I see it is, there's no growing without growing pains. And this is the stage that Tauranga and Western Bay is in right now. But we don't want to, well, the way I see it is I don't want to lose sight of the vision. And the vision is a really connected, dense city and district with livability, movability and all of those things, no congestion, healthy active modes. And I think it's sort of like with this growing pains phase, I suppose that's the phase we're in. And, even does align with the government, growth, going for growth. Well, we're in a growth phase and we're going through growing pains. So like all of these solutions are, how do we transition through the growing pain stage of this city's development to get to Nirvana, which is a connected city with, you know, healthy active modes and blah, blah, blah. And so all of these things like, you know, the T2, T3, you know, maybe in the future it would only be buses, but what are the short-term fixes that get us through this stage? And yeah, to me, that's really clear, Mike, from what you're saying. And it makes a lot of sense.
Ben?
I'm just thinking in terms of the connected centres plan. I think the piece that's always been missing for me is, yes, the vision is, you know, we didn't go with a compact city. We didn't go with these other models that were looked at, like rail enabled growth. We went with connected centres. So how are they going to be connected? And it's always been almost just implied that it'd be public transport would be there'd be quality public transport connections between the centres. And you see the little map, and you see the whatever, I can't remember, 13 centres or whatever, and which changes a little bit over time. And my question is still the same thing, which is, do we have any idea of what it is we're talking about, like on the ground from Te Puke to Papamoa, etc.? You know, how are they going to be connected? Do we? And I know in my own submission to the Regional Land Transport Committee, I think it was a new road, which wasn't my normal submission for the organisation I was working for at the time, but it was between Te Puke and Papamoa East, saying that will surely be in the future a key connection, and hopefully a key multimodal connection, which could help to connect up our public transport network. But all those things, to me, there's a missing piece there, which is saying whether it's in the east or whether it's in the west, what are we actually talking about to connect these? Are we talking about just another bus route for, instead of $1 million a year or whatever, it'll be 2 million because it's so far out and takes so long to get around? You know, I have no idea. I think if at the end of this 2 years, as part of the strategic work, and presumably that business case hopefully will pick it up at some point anyway, but to be really clear, what are we really saying as a group of councils around how we want people to be able to connect between those centres? Because I don't think we have a realistic scenario to have rapid transit between all 13 centres. So are there a few key hubs that will have really prioritised connections? And if so, what do we do on the ground at TCC to lay the groundwork to put in, say, the key connection between, I mean, it's almost between Sandhurst probably now, is it, Rick, where congestion comes along, you know, there and starts to clog up the network, and then to get on those managed lanes on Hewlett's, you know, that's a gap in the network. How do we do that? Do we want to make a plan over the next 2 years so that when presumably a Labour, Greens, whatever government comes along sometime, we're ready to go if that is still our plan? And if it's not our plan, we better figure out what we're going to do in terms of, I think it was double-decker Hewlett's Road, wasn't it, when you were on council, that was talked about?
Rick, it's getting close to 5 o'clock.
Good on you, Mike Seaborn, for your idea. I think we just need to reanalyse, you know, where we're at, take stock of the changes and how we can move forward in the best way. And to me, in terms of Councillor McMillan and the growth pains, our growth pains largely are from population growth, this huge surge of immigration. But unfortunately, at the same time, we haven't got economic growth, you know, per capita economic growth. So we're in a situation where soon, once that does pick up, it won't be overnight, but when it does, we'll have a cumulative problem where we've got a whole lot of population growth. And we all know what happens when we get economic growth, and when people, you know, the wheels start turning, you know, in terms of heavy transport, people going to more jobs, you know, the roads get really busy. Lucky that's not happening now, it's actually going the other way. So our population growth has been largely offset in terms of traffic demand by the drop in net economic growth. So boy, it's looming. We're going to be in real deep duties soon, in 2 or 3 years. Because also the government, because of the lack of economic growth, sure, population growth, but their tax take will be dropping quickly, and that's why they're not committing to anything. So we haven't got any money to try and take steps to ensure that what's going to happen soon in terms of that huge traffic demand is going to be met, because we haven't got any money to invest. Our ratepayers, we can't look at them because they're in deep doo-doos too, cost of living, etc. So I don't know, what the solutions are, except for brace ourselves for what's coming up in terms of traffic. So, Mike, I'd love to see some work on that, taking everything into account and how we best move forward. This takes some good brains, and we've got them here to jointly work on this problem that we're going to face.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Last one.
Very quick, and I normally am. So just a couple of things. I take Mike's point, and I think strategic is where we need to be. We've probably got him into the weeds a little bit this afternoon, which we need to be careful of doing that, because it just stretches the time and we lose our value. Can I also ask, from an admin point of view, could we have had that presentation earlier perhaps, and we might have had a few better answers perhaps to some of your questions? So going forward, if we could get those things sent out early, that'd be great. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. I think that was a helpful conversation for staff, and I think the next steps from what I picked up and from what Mike's just mentioned is that staff can go away and bring back probably a slightly different level of reporting, and have a look at how that might evolve, or what that looks like, and focus on probably some of that bus time saving stuff, the managed lanes, and also the parking and fares, and how they can work together. But I don't know, if Mike, if you've got anything else that I might have missed in terms of that initial piece that we can start working on for the next meeting, but longer term, start working on a program that really works at more of a strategic level and fits with the strategic documents that we've got. Mike.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, I think an agenda that sits in a strategic mode for the start, and then we can be more operational as operational items are required. And certainly at the next meeting, just reaffirming what was the strategic objectives that were agreed and we were aligned as organisations around, and then maybe an assessment by staff around the impacts of the current GPS on that, and a report of that nature. And then that will generate a discussion around the level of comfort around the direction of travel, and then that will indicate the tasks that we need to do next. But I had written down here a strategic network plan, and to answer some of your questions, Councillor Crowther, that the linkages between all those nodes are not understood in real terms, or even dotted lines on a map terms. And I think that's what staff would like to help pull together over the period of this committee, is to have that kind of battle plan, if you like. So if the winds do change, then we are ready, and we have an understanding, and the partners know what each needs to do, and the timelines that we need to do them. So, that would be one of the outputs I think we should be working towards. What is a strategic network plan? I don't have any idea right now, but we need to work that up and figure out what direction.
All right. Any concluding remarks before we wind this up?
Everyone have a nice week.
Oh, good. Again. Yeah, Valentine's. My wife's gone to Auckland, so I'm on my own.